Just wanted to say thank you real quick to everyone who's come to the videos and participated in the discussion. I think based on what I'm seeing in the discussions, the vast majority of you are of the same mind as I am. You might not have the exact same conclusion as to what exactly happened, but the idea that this was just some random accident based on negligence is just not believable by any reasonable-minded person. The idea that a ship like this advanced of a ship, could be snuck up on in that way by something that large, while operations, according to the Navy, all the way up into the point of impact, operations aboard were normal. How in the hell can that be true? They'd have to be anything but normal for something like this to occur. These ships were designed for this exact thing to not be able to happen. So, this is a Popular Mechanics article. It talks about the role of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and I think the important thing to focus on in the article here is what the main role is. The Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers were conceived in the 1980s as anti-air warfare destroyers designed to shoot down Soviet missiles during the Cold War. It was widely believed that the Soviet Air Force and Navy would launch coordinated barrages of anti-ship missiles at U.S. Navy aircraft carriers, all of which carried extremely large warheads and which could also carry nuclear warheads. In response, the U.S. Navy built up a layered defense system consisting of F-14 Tomcats, fighters, phalanx close-in weapons, and in between were the Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers, and backing them up, the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. So, that's the role of this ship. Initially, that's how it was conceived. Now, it's been used in other roles, of course, we've seen. In fact, not very long ago, it was the type of destroyer, I believe, that was firing missiles into Syria. Where this happened, I don't think is any kind of a coincidence either. This was a lot farther away from the China Sea than I originally thought it was, but nevertheless, I am going to cover this because China claims indisputable sovereignty over all the South China Sea islands and their adjacent waters. I just pulled up a quick map here, just so everybody can have a kind of a regional overview of what's going on here. This happened right here, up here where my cursor is, off this little tip. But strangely enough, the ship, the container ship, left from this little port here, I'll zoom in a little bit, this little port here, and transited around this way, like this. But nobody really knows where the Fitzgerald was coming from. Now, it was part of the strike group that just did the show of force over here in North Korea, so I suppose it could have been Sea of Japan and come around this way. Or, since it's making the allegation, the investigators are making the allegation that both ships were on an almost parallel trajectory. If this one was going this way, you'd have to assume that the Fitzgerald was also heading in the direction toward Tokyo when it was hit. Well, if you draw that line straight back, folks, East China Sea. You know, this article here is China warned the Dewey to stay out of there. And with the new administration, I'm wondering if China's taken a completely different tack on this, because they don't want to confront Mr. Trump directly and give him a reason to start a shooting war and have his popularity numbers go up because of that. This type of an attack, subtle, doesn't leave any fingerprints, but still achieves the goal of removing the asset from the region, which is what the result is. The grand result of this is that an asset, a U.S. Navy asset, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, has been removed from duty and removed from operations in the region. That is what has happened. And assuming now that everyone is on the same sheet of music, that we're believing this is not an accident, someone benefited from this. Who benefited from there not being a U.S. presence, destroyer presence, in that region? Well, the Japanese are our allies. That only leaves a couple of people. And who has been threatening to launch missiles last year or so? That's right. These folks. And look where this happened. North Korea, here. China's over here. We know the destroyer was on a track going north and east. Who knows where it was? or why it was running dark, as they say, as is alleged, that the destroyer for operational security wasn't broadcasting its position, broadcasting its location. This thing with the, this is May 25, 2017. This wasn't very long ago, folks, that the China warned another Navy destroyer to stay away from the Spratly Islands down there in the South China Sea. Maybe this was just an answer to it, saying, look, if you continue to operate down there and you operate dark, we're going to find a way to take out your assets. It's what it's looking like to me, folks. I mean, I don't know about you, but you'd have to ask yourself a question from an attack or terrorism standpoint if you're really going to stick with the idea that this was an accident. After the USS Cole bombing, when a little bitty ship, listen to me, it was a boat, basically, 20-foot boat, sails right up next to one of our destroyers, who was parked in port refueling, by the way, didn't have the ability to get away, and blew up an explosive and cut a giant hole in it, killed a bunch of sailors. After that, the U.S. Navy changed its whole tactic on this. And we've seen, through the news that, the Iranian Navy has tested how far away that it can get before people aboard the boat start to react and start to conduct operations to maintain operational security around the area of influence or sphere of influence of that boat. So I think that's something that the Iranians are well aware of. The Chinese are well aware of it. So this idea that you could sneak a boat like this up next to a destroyer, if the destroyer was operating normally, as the Navy says, which is just, I don't know how they can even say that with a straight face. Normal operations wouldn't have allowed this, even at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever it was. So, anyway, I think we have a lead on a culprit anyway, that the Chinese or the Russians have their hands in this. Because I really don't think this is something that Al-Qaeda or any terrorist organization by themselves, they might have been able to get the information necessary, and I made that allegation in the last video, that perhaps the issue down in Colombia, where the 3 very high-ranking Marines were deprived of classified materials by some hookers in Bogota, that if that information fell into the wrong hands, and we do know in South America, the northern part of it there are Hezbollah operatives, how that could have been used. That might have been something where the information was just made privy to the right people at the right time. And they figured out a way to get close to this thing and figured out a way to keep their hands off of it. Because what better way to conduct a war when the person you're attacking doesn't even know you're attacking? The greatest enemy that you will ever have in the world, folks, is the one that you don't know you have. If you know you have an enemy, you can make contingent for that, and you can make plan for that, and you can put up defenses against that and be on guard for that. But when you're attacked and you don't know where it came from, and you don't know who was responsible, and you don't know where to look, there's no way. Or if it's somebody you thought was your friend. I have a lot of friends that conceal carry with weapons, and they debate, the larger ones versus the smaller ones versus accuracy. And, if everything did fall apart over here, and I know this is not related, but it's just, I think, to the same mindset, the biggest people you're going to have to worry about are the people you trust the most. And in this case, that might have been the case. This big, enormous, lumbering cargo ship might not have even been seen as a threat. And that's why, unlike a little bitty tiny PT boat, this thing was able to just sail right into the side of this thing. It's an incredibly hard thing to explain, and I know even saying it sounds crazy, but there's no way this could be an accident. It's just not possible. If this happens in a very tight, congested shipping lane and one ship bumps another, sure. In port, all sorts of things happen. If there was some kind of a failure of a radar or some kind of a failure of any type of electronics, and this was a congested area. See, people have made that allegation too. that this is a very congested shipping area, and the idea that two ships could do this is likely. If that were the case, there would have been somebody on the bridge of that big container ship keeping a lookout, because they have we have a security interest in maintaining the safety and the operational status of this ship, but the person who operates the big container ship has a giant financial interest in maintaining it being able to deliver its goods on time and safely. And once again, and I'll just leave it here with, if that ship hit a 600-foot destroyer this hard, it wouldn't have just slightly jostled the ship and the crew would have said, "Oh, what's that?" and then just, got up and scratched their head and ambled their way up and kind of looked around to see what happened, and then a half hour later decided to turn the ship around and see what happened. They could have made their way to the bridge, and the bridge of one of those ships sits way, way up off the water. You can see for 50 miles. And this ship, this destroyer, would have had all sorts of alarms going off. There would have been people yelling. There would have been all sorts of mayhem aboard this ship, which would have, how sound travels at night over water? The people aboard the cargo ship would have known immediately. They wouldn't have just sailed on for another 30 minutes. Autopilot or not. It just wouldn't have gone down this way if this were what they're saying it was. So anyway, I'm going to cut this short because I just want you folks to have the discussion and just to continue to provide the information out there in a way that's intelligent, thoughtful, and maybe we can get to the bottom of this. So like, share, subscribe. Thank you once again for all the views. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.